So, thank you all for being here tonight. It cannot be the night we've long anticipated because of the absence of Stephen Sondheim. His amazing lyrics for West Side Story first put him on the map and launched a career that would completely redraw that map, reinvent the musical and theater, and create a body of work that beyond any doubt is as immortal as anything made by a mortal can be. To borrow what Ben Jonson wrote about Shakespeare, Stephen Sondheim was not of an age, but for all time. And Stephen was a big part of the making of our film of West Side Story, from the earliest screenplay, drafts, to every recording session, which Steve attended without fail. Listening with his eyes closed, he'd sway, he'd swoon, or he'd grimace and flinch. So I caught myself watching Steve's expression, sometimes more than the actors, because they perfectly reflected what everyone was doing. He always deferred to our musical director, Janine Tesori. Janine directed all the vocal performances, but his insistence, like Janine's, was on telling emotional truths based on an understanding of character. You can get through any challenges presented by the complicated score, Steve said, as long as you know who you are and what you're feeling. And he and I became good friends. He was SS1 and I was SS2. And I insisted on that ranking. Our friendship formed around the work on West Side Story. It grew when I realized that Steve possessed an infinite storehouse of movie knowledge and trivia. He told me things like about his fondness for actresses with smoky voices like Ida Lupino and Glynis Johns, and how many different ways Margaret Sullivan had died in her films, imagining that her contract with MGM stipulated that she could never be killed the same way twice. Those were the details that never escaped Steve's notice, either on the boards or on the movie screen. And like everyone else on the planet who cares about words and music, I'm heartbroken at this sudden loss. But Steve is here with us tonight in the form of his great abiding genius in the glorious musical he helped to bring into the world 64 years ago. And he's also here in our gratitude for all the art and culture he left behind. Thank you, Steve. Steve was one of the 4 legendary creators of West Side Story. It was Jerome Robbins who first assembled the team to turn Romeo and Juliet into a contemporary musical, and Jerome Robbins' choreography revolutionized modern dance. Arthur Laurents took Shakespeare's masterpiece and concentrated it into a riveting urban story. And then Leonard Bernstein composed a score so achingly beautiful and so emotional and so alive, it can only be heard and not described. And when Arthur Laurents introduced Bernstein to this 24-year-old novice songwriter, Bernstein had the great good sense to hire him as his lyricist. Those 4 creators are represented here tonight by their estates. So please join me in recognizing, if you would stand, please, Alan Greenberg, Chris Pennington, and Ellen Soren of the Jerome Robbins estate. Please welcome David Saint and Jonathan Loma of the Arthur Laurents estate, if you'll stand up. And personally, from their Uncle Stevie, Lenny's kids, Jamie Bernstein, Alexander Bernstein, and Nina Bernstein Simmons. And Rick Pappas, who worked so closely with Steve for so many years. Steve loves that you're here right now. So you guys gave us permission as we set about to interpret the world of these four great artists, the world that they created. You were all active participants in the project, and our film exists only because you trusted us and believed in us, and we're deeply grateful for everything that you've given us. Thank you very much. Now, I'm also thrilled that in the audience tonight are several members of the cast of the monumental and inimitable 1961 Robert Wise Jerry Robbins film of West Side Story. So if you'll stand, please. Elliot Feld, David Bean, Burt Michaels, and the amazing Russ Tamblyn. Thank you. As Steve so often said, all art is collaborative, but there is no art form more collaborative than a musical, and that includes a film musical. I have never worked with a more committed, more brilliantly talented group of people than the people I made this movie with, and I love you, and I admire you, and I am more grateful to you than I can possibly say. And I'd like to thank all of you if we had the time tonight, but let me please just mention a few. Producers Christy McCosko-Krieger and Kevin McCollum. Executive producers Daniel Lupi and Adam Sumner. Our choreographer, Justin Peck. Director of photography, Janusz Kaminski. Production designer, Adam Stockhausen. Costume designer, Paul Tazwell. And our musical gurus, Janine Tesori, David Newman, and Matt Sullivan. And our conductor, who is not here tonight, Gustavo Dudamel. And our screenwriter, who always is here for me, Tony Kushner. Then there's our equally gifted cast. Just stand up as I call your names. Brian Darcy James, who plays Officer Krupke. Corey Stoll, who plays Lieutenant Schrank. Iris Menace, who plays Anybody's. Josh Rivera, who plays Chino. Mike Faist, who plays Riff. Our Bernardo, David Alvarez. Our Anita, Ariana DeBose. And our Tony and Maria, Ansel, Elgort, and Rachel Zegler. And all the other members of our cast, Sharks and Jacks alike, who are here tonight, will all of you please stand up? Great. Thank you. Okay. And cut. While I'm listing indispensable people, I have to thank the most indispensable of all, who is my wife, Kate Capshaw. Because every time I said to her that this idea of mine of making a new film based on West Side Story was probably the craziest idea I'd ever had, and I need to have my head examined, Kate said what I most needed to hear. She said, "Get over it." She said, "Don't be scared. This will be a good thing to put out into the world. Keep going and lead with love." And finally, it gives me enormous pleasure to introduce my friend, my collaborator, our executive producer, and my Valentina, the one and the only Rita Moreno. So, thank you all for coming and sharing tonight with us. And thank you, Steve, for the hat. We all miss you.